On May 21, 2026, FIFA revealed the official song for the 2026 World Cup. It was called Goals, and it brought together three of the biggest pop names on the planet: Brazilian star Anitta, Nigerian artist Rema, and Blackpink's Lisa, the first K-pop soloist ever placed at the center of a World Cup anthem. For a few hours, it looked like a straightforward celebration. The news spread fast across fan communities on multiple continents. Then, almost as quickly, the tone shifted. Football forums filled up with complaints about the song. K-pop fan accounts and football fan accounts started arguing across timelines. Entertainment outlets in South Korea ran headlines asking whether Lisa even belonged on a stage this size. What was supposed to be a victory lap for one of the most recognizable performers in the world had, within days, turned into one of the more unexpected pop culture debates of the entire tournament. So what actually happened here? And why did a booking meant to bring people together end up dividing them instead? This video breaks down exactly what happened with Lisa's FIFA World Cup 2026 involvement, the announcement, the criticism, and the defense of it, so you walk away understanding both sides of the debate. We're not here to tell you who's right. We're here to explain why reasonable people ended up disagreeing. Part 1. Who is Lisa? Context for non-fans. To understand why FIFA would even consider Lisa for a stage this size, it helps to look at where her career actually stands. Lisa, born Lalisa Manobal in Buriram, Thailand in 1997, rose to global fame as a member of Blackpink, the K-pop girl group that debuted in 2016, and went on to become one of the best-selling acts in the genre's history. As the group's main dancer and one of its rappers, Lisa built a reputation as one of Blackpink's most technically sharp performers, known for precise choreography and a commanding stage presence in front of stadium-sized crowds. Beyond the group, Lisa has built one of the largest individual social media followings of any musician alive, reportedly ranking among the most followed artists on Instagram worldwide. In 2024, she reportedly released her debut solo studio album, expanding a solo catalog that had already produced internationally charting singles. She has also moved into acting, taking on a recurring role in the Netflix series Emily in Paris. Her profile in the luxury fashion world has grown alongside her music career. She has reportedly served as a global ambassador for major fashion houses, including Celine, and has appeared at high-profile award shows, red carpets, and runway events well outside the K-pop ecosystem. Industry observers have pointed to this cross-industry visibility as one reason organizers may view her as a fit for a global broadcast audience, rather than a niche one. Within Blackpink, the group has reportedly set multiple industry records for a K-pop act, including some of the highest-viewed music videos in the genre's history and headline slots at major international festivals. On the solo side, Lisa's early singles reportedly broke first-day streaming records for a K-pop soloist, and she has continued releasing new material and collaborating with artists from outside the K-pop world entirely, a pattern that has steadily pushed her audience beyond Blackpink's core fanbase and into more general pop culture spaces. In short, by 2026, Lisa wasn't simply a K-pop star with a dedicated fanbase. According to multiple entertainment outlets, she had become one of a small handful of performers whose reach extends well beyond any single genre, region, or industry, which is roughly the profile FIFA has historically looked for when selecting World Cup performers. Part 2. FIFA and the tradition of spectacle. To understand the controversy, it also helps to understand something FIFA has done for decades. Pairing global pop stars with the World Cup is not new. It's tradition. Official World Cup songs and opening ceremonies have long been used as a way to reach audiences far beyond hardcore football fans. The 1990 tournament in Italy had Una State Italiana. The 1998 tournament in France gave the world Ricky Martin's La Coppa della Vita. South Africa's 2010 tournament is still remembered for Shakira's Waka Waka, This Time for Africa, and Kanan's Wavin' Flag, songs so tied to that World Cup that many casual fans associate them with the tournament itself. Brazil 2014 brought in Pitbull, Jennifer Lopez, and Claudia Leite. Russia 2018 featured Nicky Jam and Will Smith. Qatar 2022 leaned on a roster that included Nicki Minaj and Maluma, a pairing that itself drew a mixed reception at the time. The logic behind this pattern has generally been straightforward. The World Cup is one of the only events on Earth capable of drawing a genuinely global television audience, and FIFA has repeatedly used musical performances to widen that audience even further, pulling in viewers who might not watch football regularly, but who will tune in for a favorite artist. This context matters, because it means Lisa's booking wasn't an isolated or unprecedented decision. It fits a long-running strategy of using globally recognized musicians, often from outside the football world entirely, to soundtrack the tournament. What made 2026 notable wasn't the strategy itself, it was the specific artist chosen to represent it, and the genre most associated with her. It's also worth noting that this pattern hasn't been limited to opening ceremonies. Closing ceremonies, official anthems, and even mid-tournament promotional campaigns have all, at different points, leaned on musical guests with little direct connection to football itself. Actors, DJs, pop vocalists, specifically because their fame traveled further than any single players or teams. Viewed against that backdrop, using music as a bridge to a wider audience has arguably become as much a part of World Cup tradition as the matches themselves. That distinction, precedent versus specifics, is where much of this debate actually begins. Part 3. The announcement. What happened? Here's what was actually confirmed. In May 2026, FIFA and its music partners announced Goals as one of the tournament's official songs, credited to Lisa, Anita, and Rima, with production reportedly handled by a Grammy-connected production team. The song was framed as a genre fusion piece, blending K-pop, Latin pop, and Afrobeats, reflecting the specific backgrounds of the three artists involved. Separately, FIFA also confirmed that singer-songwriter Ejai would perform the tournament's other official theme song DNA, alongside tenor Andrea Bocelli, at a different opening ceremony held in Mexico City. In other words, more than one artist and more than one musical style were part of the 2026 rollout. Lisa's involvement was one piece of a larger, multi-artist campaign, not the entirety of it. On June 12th, Lisa performed Goals live at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles as part of the tournament's U.S. opening ceremony, appearing alongside Anita and Rima in front of a global broadcast audience and a stadium full of dancers. Based on social media activity in the hours that followed, the initial reaction appeared to be a genuine mix. Enthusiasm from fans of all three artists, alongside immediate critique, some directed at the song itself and some at the performance. The music video for Goals reportedly crossed several million views within its first day online, a figure that outlets covering the story pointed to as evidence of the song's immediate commercial pull, regardless of how critics ultimately felt about it. That combination, strong numbers alongside vocal criticism, is part of what made the story worth covering in the first place. Within a single news cycle, Lisa FIFA backlash and Lisa World Cup criticism had become widely searched terms, a sign that whatever was happening online was resonating well beyond the usual K-pop fan spaces. Part 4. Where the criticism came from. To take the criticism seriously, it helps to separate it into a few distinct threads, because backlash often gets treated as one big wave of anger when it's really several different arguments happening at once. What some outlets framed as a broader Kpop FIFA controversy was, on closer inspection, layered. The first and most consistent thread was about the song itself. Football fans and music critics reportedly argued that Goals leaned more toward a generic pop or nightlife sound than the anthemic unifying tone associated with past World Cup songs. Comparisons to Shakira's Waka Waka and Kanan's Wavin' Flag came up repeatedly, with some listeners suggesting those earlier tracks captured universal themes: unity, celebration, national pride, in a way this year's song reportedly did not. The second thread was about live performance quality. Some viewers online questioned aspects of Lisa's stage performance, including accusations, unverified and disputed by others, that portions of the vocals were pre-recorded. This kind of scrutiny tends to follow almost any high-profile live broadcast performance, but it added another layer specifically directed at her segment of the show. The third and perhaps most pointed thread came from segments of the Korean entertainment audience itself, where some commentators argued that Lisa's solo catalog, separate from her work with Blackpink, hadn't yet produced the kind of universally recognized solo hit that would justify a spot on a stage of this size. For some critics, this wasn't necessarily an argument against K-pop as a genre. It was framed as a more specific question about whether this particular artist, at this particular point in her solo career, was the right fit for this particular moment. Underneath all three threads sits a broader, more familiar debate in sports culture: how much entertainmentification a tournament like the World Cup should embrace before it starts to feel, to some purists, less like a football event and more like a general pop concert with a football backdrop. That's not a new complaint. Versions of it have followed halftime shows and opening ceremonies for years, from criticism of Super Bowl musical guests to debates over past World Cup anthems that fans felt didn't match the moment. But for a segment of football-first viewers, Lisa's booking became this tournament's flashpoint for it. Part 5. Where the support came from. On the other side of the debate, plenty of fans and industry observers pushed back, and their arguments deserve equal space here. The most common defense centered on reach. Supporters pointed out that the World Cup is, by design, a global entertainment product as much as a sporting one, and that FIFA has a long history of choosing performers specifically because they can pull in international, non-traditional audiences. From that angle, booking Lisa, an artist reportedly among the most followed musicians in the world, wasn't a departure from football culture. It was, supporters argued, a continuation of exactly what World Cup ceremonies have done for decades, just with a newer generation of global pop stars fronting it. Fans also pointed to the numbers. Despite the criticism, Goals reportedly reached millions of views within its first day of release, and clips of Lisa's individual performance circulated widely across platforms. Supporters argued that this kind of virality and controversy aren't mutually exclusive, that a polarizing reaction is often a byproduct of genuine cultural relevance rather than proof that a booking failed. There was also a more personal thread to some of the defense. Several fans noted that Lisa reportedly wore the jersey of South Korean national team player Lee Kang-in during her appearance, framing it as a small but genuine gesture of support for the sport itself, a detail supporters used to push back on the idea that she was an outsider with no real connection to football culture. Finally, some commentators placed the entire moment in a wider cultural context. K-pop's global fanbase is enormous, cross-generational, and increasingly overlaps with mainstream sports audiences. From that perspective, pairing a K-pop soloist with a Brazilian and a Nigerian artist on the same World Cup stage wasn't pandering. It was, in this view, a reasonably accurate reflection of who actually watches football worldwide in 2026, an audience that skews younger, more international, and more genre-fluid than it did a generation ago. Part 6. The bigger picture: sport, music, and global audiences. Zoomed out, the Lisa debate is really just one data point in a much bigger trend. Major sports organizations increasingly leaning on global pop stars to expand their audience beyond traditional fans. This isn't unique to football. The Olympics, the Super Bowl, and other major sporting events have all, at various points, faced a similar tension between longtime fans who want the spotlight kept on the sport itself and organizers who see musical crossover moments as a way to reach younger, more international viewers who might not otherwise tune in at all. FIFA appears to be leaning further into this approach, not away from it. Later in the same tournament cycle, FIFA confirmed that BTS would headline the World Cup Finals halftime show alongside Shakira and Madonna, a lineup that, on paper, suggests organizers see K-pop's global fanbase as a long-term audience they want at football's biggest matches, not a one-off experiment tied to a single artist or a single tournament. For traditionalist fans, this creates real and understandable tension. Football, for many supporters, carries a cultural weight tied specifically to the sport's history, its regional identities, and its own musical traditions. Think terrace chants and national anthems rather than chart pop collaborations. Some worry that leaning too heavily into pop spectacle risks diluting that identity over time, turning a football tournament into a generic entertainment showcase that happens to have a football tournament attached to it. For younger or more globally connected fans, the opposite is often true. They tend to see football and global pop culture as already deeply intertwined, through streaming, through social media, through the fact that footballers themselves are now pop culture figures with fashion deals and brand partnerships of their own. From that vantage point, moments like Lisa's booking aren't distorting football culture. They're simply reflecting where global fandom already is. Neither view is unreasonable. They're describing the same event through two different sets of priorities, one rooted in preserving tradition, the other in expanding reach. Supporters of the booking have also pointed back to history for reassurance. Shakira's Waka Waka, now treated almost as a sacred text among World Cup songs, was itself a crossover pop track by an artist with no direct connection to football when it debuted, and it faced its own share of early skepticism before becoming a beloved fixture of the tournament's legacy. From that angle, today's criticism of Goals doesn't necessarily predict how the song, or Lisa's moment on that stage, will be remembered years from now. Part 7. How Lisa and her team have handled it. Throughout the controversy, Lisa's public response, like that of most artists navigating this kind of moment, appears to have been fairly measured. In interviews tied to the song's release, Lisa reportedly described the collaboration as an exciting experience and spoke generally about music's ability to bring different audiences together, without directly addressing the specific criticism aimed at the song or her performance. This is a fairly typical approach for public figures caught in a fast-moving online debate. Rather than responding point by point to individual critiques, artists and their teams often let the performance, the streaming numbers, and time itself do the talking. There's no public indication that Lisa or her team treated the criticism as a crisis requiring damage control. Her broader schedule around the World Cup, including continued promotion tied to the song and her existing brand commitments, reportedly continued largely as planned. For an artist operating at her level of global visibility, some degree of polarized reaction has become a fairly routine part of any high-profile booking, and industry observers generally note that the standard approach isn't to argue with critics online, but to keep performing and let public opinion settle on its own over time. That measured approach also tends to reflect a practical reality. With a global audience, this large unanimous approval was never really on the table. Any artist stepping into a moment this visible is, in effect, signing up for a mixed reaction as part of the job, which may be why neither Lisa nor her team appear to have treated the criticism as anything unusual. Part 8. What this debate really reveals. Step back far enough, and this controversy isn't really about one song, or one performance, or even one artist. It's a small window into a much larger shift happening across entertainment and sports right now. Fandoms that used to exist in separate lanes, football supporters, K-pop stans, Latin pop and Afrobeats audiences, increasingly collide on the same platforms, watching the same broadcasts, and reacting in real time to the same 3-minute clip. That collision doesn't always produce agreement, and it isn't supposed to. Different fan cultures bring genuinely different expectations about what a World Cup song should sound like, what a real live performance looks like, and who has earned the right to stand on a stage of that size in the first place. There's also a generational element worth naming. Younger audiences, raised on genre-blending playlists and global streaming charts, often see collaborations like Lisa, Anita, and Rima as an obvious low-friction fit for a modern global event. Older or more traditional football audiences, shaped by decades of very specific World Cup musical moments, sometimes measure new anthems against a much narrower and much more nostalgic bar. Neither audience is wrong to want what it wants. But the fact that FIFA now has to try to satisfy both, often within the same 3-minute broadcast segment, says a lot about how large, how diverse, and how genuinely difficult to please a truly global sports audience has become in 2026. It also suggests that moments like this one won't be going away. As long as major tournaments keep chasing global reach, some version of this exact debate will likely resurface with the next artist, the next anthem, and the next ceremony. So, was Lisa's FIFA World Cup 2026 booking a misstep, or a sign of where global sports entertainment is genuinely headed? Honestly, that depends less on the facts of what happened, and more on what you personally believe a World Cup stage is for. If you believe football's biggest moments should center football-specific culture and artists, the criticism probably felt justified to you. If you believe the World Cup has always functioned as a global entertainment platform first, with football at its core but never in isolation, the booking probably felt like a natural, maybe even overdue, evolution. Both positions come from a genuine care about what this tournament represents. They simply define that care differently. What seems clear, looking at the full picture, is that this was never really a story about talent, nationality, or gender. It was a story about programming choices at one of the biggest stages on Earth, and about how differently people define what belongs there. So we'll leave it with you. Do you think major sporting events benefit from bringing in global pop stars the way FIFA did here? Or should the spotlight stay closer to football-specific tradition? Drop your honest take in the comments below. This is one of those debates where actually reading the other side's reasoning is worth your time.